I think we got people. We're good. We're already 15 minutes behind. Hello. Hello. Hey, turn off party mode here.
You use that one? Maybe?
Yeah. No, it's. Hello. Nope, that one. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Yes. Okay. This could be louder then.
Is it too loud?
No. I don't hear it. I don't.
Again?
Hello. I'm gonna hear a little bit, but. We're getting a little feedback. Hello? No, that doesn't sound like it's. Hello? Test. 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 Test.
I mean, again, like it did.
I don't know. Yeah.
Before, and it was working.
Hello? Why is this not very loud? This is not very loud. It's not very loud. Hey, you made it.
Hi.
You want to ask that because the mic's not really picking up. Hello? No? No, we got that. But yeah, if we turn mic 1 all the way up, it's still not. Like yesterday it was loud. It's just not very loud. Oh, it's that. Okay. Yeah, maybe. No? I'm not sure. Because that's all the way up. So we have some money. That's okay. Test? I feel like yesterday was louder.
Yeah, it was.
Hello?
Yeah, that's the main channel, right?
Hello? Oh, there we go.
This
That's
one.
the master one. Okay. The hello? Hello? Okay, hi. Who's ready for some science? We try it again. Who's ready for some science? Yeah, there we go. Welcome to Pint of Science. This is our second evening. We are going to be talking about energy and energy transitions. And maybe this is a little too loud. A little tough? Yeah, okay. That's probably better. It's not that big a space. We have some really wonderful speakers tonight. We have some great speakers for you tonight. We got this streaming, so if you miss anything, you can go watch it later. We are in, 4 other cities around Norway too, so you can go watch them later. And yeah, I know we have a presentation for this. I was just getting everyone started and introducing what we're doing. But we have a presentation on what we are, so the video.
Hi. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Lavinia. I'm the coordinator of the team operating in Oslo for Pint of Science. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. So as Matthew was saying, we are a quite big community in Norway, a relatively big, let's say, community in Norway with science. So what is Pint of Science? Pint of Science is an international organization working on science communication in this week. So we try, at least we try to bring science in places like this, in bars, pubs, where people can chill and relax and have a nice drink. And at the same time, you can also listen to our speakers, so attend an actual presentation about science, about the last updates in science. And all our speakers come from our environment. So in this case, from Oslo, the Oslo science scenario, just to give you the picture of what's happening here in terms of science research. And started in UK, and then it spread quite quickly all around the world. So now we have teams basically everywhere, almost every country. So this picture is updated 2019 because, of course, we had a pandemic after that. So something more happened, but not a lot. But what about Norway? So in Norway, we have 5 teams: Oslo, Stavanger, Bergen, and Tromsø. And as you know, maybe you don't know, but the main work that we do is organizing this festival every year. It takes place every year in the same day, in the same days all over the world. So every single team, every single Pint of Science team is now having a Pint of Science festival. So the same is happening also in these other 4 cities in Norway. And if you're interested in Pint of Science, you can of course follow us on our social media, and you can send us an email if you want information, and we of course have also a website. And this is the team. This is the team of Kind 2023. I must thank all these faces, all the people you see here. We are all volunteers in Kind of Science. Everything we do it in our spare time. So everything is organized in our spare time, and everyone is working very hard. And I really need to thank every single person here. Also, those you can't see because it's not maybe physically here, but they work a lot. And nothing of this would be possible without our speakers. Also, our speakers are kind of volunteers because they're doing this for free, and we're really thankful for this because we know that we are also researchers, so we know that preparing this type of presentations is particularly difficult and hard. Communicate your research in a funny way, an easy way. Uh, it's more difficult than preparing a normal, let's say, average presentation for a conference, for example. And we also need to thank our sponsors because, again, nothing could be done without the contribution of our sponsor. This year, Simula is supporting, actually, Simula is supporting since the beginning of Part of Science Norway. We started in 2020 and we had the first 2 editions online, and then so this is the second edition in person. We're actually streaming. But Simula is supporting since the beginning of this journey. So we need to thank them all. If you want to send us your feedback at the end of this day, we would be very, very grateful because it's really important for us to know what you think about tonight and this organization. And if you want to join the team, we always have a call for volunteer that is continuously open. So everyone is welcome in the team. There's always a lot of work to do, as you can imagine. So please join the team. And well, last but not least, we will have a quiz in a few minutes. So if you have your app, your Mentimeter app, just use this code. If you don't have it yet, just download it and use this code. There's always a small gift for the winner. And now I'm happy to leave this floor to person that needs to that is here to present a very nice initiative. And please is Elliot Lambert. He was actually one of our speakers last year with a very nice presentation about parasites, unforgettable. And he's gonna present very quickly a very nice initiative, and I'm gonna leave the floor to him. Please. Because I need to.
Oops, we struggle.
Should I start? Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm just presenting for 5 minutes a workshop that will take place this Thursday. And it was good that Team of Science was interested to help us to promote it because we believe that it's quite connected with the World Festival. So what is actually Climate Fresk? Okay. So before we explain deeper, the main challenge with climate change is about how people can talk about climate change. It's never easy because the concept is very complex. It divides people. Nobody agrees on the whole concept. It often can be boring and most of the time overwhelming. So the Climate Fresk, it's basically a teacher in France in a few years ago that managed to read the IPCC reports, and he realized that actually it was a very important report, but unlikely not so many people would be keen to read so many pages. So he basically designed cards based on the different information of the IPCC reports. So IPCC report is basically a summary of thousands of research papers based on different aspects of climate change. It's really recent, research based. And in less than 8 years, we have actually reached the 1 million of participants that joined our workshop. The organization is also working on a volunteering basis and train people to themselves become facilitator to organize a workshop in their cities, countries, and even in their company. And we are probably now over 40,000 facilitators around the world. The number with the universities and companies is not accurate because it's from 5 years ago, so you can expect much bigger. And it has been designed in more than 48 languages today. So the Climate Fresk is organized in 3 hours. So the first part is what you may find in many workshops with climate change, that is basically learning what is climate change. And actually you work in team, so there is no competition and you learn from each other. It doesn't matter how much you know about climate change, you will all learn something about it. Oh. Okay, no, I'm not. Sorry, which one is point?
For the pointer is the right one.
Right one? This one? This one?
Right.
Oh, right. Yeah. And actually, what is very interesting, it's like because most of the time when you go to something related with climate change, you just learn about how doomed we are, and then you go home. And then what you do, you feel even worse about yourself, and usually you don't do anything. But with the Climate Fresk, actually, we spent half an hour actually giving you the opportunity to create something out of your collage, and also 1 hour to discuss and, for example, focusing on what kind of individual action you can do. And many people start saying that I cannot do more, and then some other people start talking about what they can do, and then they're like, I didn't think about it. And then we end up with 10 different solutions that you can do right when you go home. So just to summarize, so it's aiming not being boring. It's collaborative, so there is no competition. It's really highly visual because you use the card support. It's creative. It's aimed at being simple. And again, it's based on IPCC report. It's science-based. And yeah, if you want to join us, we have 2 spots left, but we will be 3 facilitators. So if we reach the 18 participants, we will open more. So just feel free to sign up, or if you have any question, just ask me or Rema that is in the background and recording, or just ask me. And it's our first workshop. It might be the last before the summer, but if you couldn't join this one, there is also a lot of opportunity to join a workshop online because it's a participative organization. And if you really want to do one more physical, and you cannot join this one, there will be probably a new one in around August, September. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so this kind of science communication, this presentation, this whole festival to share their science. And we are looking for volunteers, we're looking for more speakers, and now we're doing a pop quiz. You have Menti sites? Oh, this is going to be more dramatic. We're going to have some gas, but we're going to kind of focusing, so we're going to have a quiz. Yeah, if you go to menti.com, and then a number's going to pop up.
Or you have to. I have to probably go to
While they figure
that.
out, I realize I haven't actually introduced myself. My name is Matthew. I'm one of the organizers for Applied Science, the education expert, consultant, whatever that is. But that's my career.
Yeah.
If you want to come be a you won't be on your own. You will have a presentation for the public rather than a sort of academic thing that we do.
Sorry.
Talking
Go on.
I'll keep talking. No, concepts. There we go.
No.
Nope. Almost. We almost had it, folks.
No, it's
Yeah.
well, I can do that.
So I get to pass this on now.
The code's on the top, yes.
Yes. Both. Okay. Yeah. So the first question is what's the share of renewable energy in the total energy consumed in Norway? Wow. Okay. 34.5 is wrong. Wow. What the 5? Okay. Point. Okay. So we are moving to the next question. Oh.
Tell them to get more points for faster.
Okay. What's Yep, it's not working.
It's press right. Nope. It's just,
Oh, it's pressed right?
yep. It should just
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Pingu. Okay. Um, let's go to the next question. 24 players. Okay. What's the share of renewable energy in the electricity? Oh, this is very interesting because of the electricity price. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, 11% is right, and 5. Oh, okay. Don't worry, we will get to know from today's presentations all the answers. If you don't know, then don't worry. Let's go to the next questions. Oh, okay. Pingu is really good. Yep. Which of these is not an alternative energy source? Oh, only one is incorrect, and most of the people are correct. Great job. Oh, Fourth one. Which of these is the cheapest source of electricity productions? Okay. Only two are correct. Okay, don't lose hope. Ooh, okay. Rich is really rich. Rich. What is Oslo's target for greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030? Oh, okay. 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 What is the primary factor limiting the potential for solar energy in Norway? It's quite fast. Oh, okay. Oh, it looks like a tough competitions. Oh, which of these rocks can act as a sponge for CO2 underground? Oh, they're really fast. Oh, 11. Great. Let's see the result. Whoa, great. So we have a small gift. Oh. Yep. Yep. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for hosting that. And thank you for all of you for participating. If you didn't win, which is everyone's a risk, you have another chance to win tomorrow. We have more prizes. Streaming microphone. So yeah, everything. Our topics for tonight are about how we are going to transition to green energy, how we're going to transition to a carbon-free future. So our first speaker is Alexander Gurovich, who's going to talk about the green transition of energy in Europe and how we can model this, how we can figure out how that's going to happen. So Alexander, I'm going to pass the mic on to you.
Or maybe I have the mic already?
You have a mic. I'm going to pass this mic. This is the local mic.
That's the local mic.
We actually get a PowerPoint to work on the first try. That would be amazing. Hey. All right, let's get a warm welcome for Alexander, please.
Alright, cool. I hope I'm not going to scream in the streaming or the local microphone. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for organizing this great event.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, so my name's Alex. I'm a third year PhD student at the Department of Mathematics. I'm going to try to tell you what my topic has to do with this, which is a photo from COP21 when the famous and, well, in all of our papers, necessary buzzword Paris Agreement was signed. So this was already 8 years ago. Since then, we have a legal or legally binding document that should force us to reduce global warming well below 2 degrees, ideally below 1.5. We're now at 1.2. But we'll see how this goes. And the point I'm going to try to make is that we need a lot of people to work on this. And I want to tell you a bit about who I'm working with. So I work at the maths department, but I also work a lot, especially on this topic, with the Department of Technology System here at the University of Oslo. And okay, oh yeah, that's better. Sorry. Yeah, and I'm going to try to present some people. So my main supervisors are from the two departments, Ed and Marianne, and then we have a lot of PhDs and postdocs who actually turn out to come from a lot of different fields. So we have some meteorologists, some engineers, some mathematicians, some economists, some social scientists, and this makes us a kind of interesting bunch. Makes it also sometimes a bit difficult to communicate between each other. But I think this is very fruitful for our research. And yeah, we're trying to research the energy transition and how we can reach these goals that we have. And I'm going to start with a personal anecdote. So this is my hometown, a bit more than 100 years ago. It was, well, literally and figuratively built with and on coal and steel. It's a city called Essen in Germany. And this is how it looked like then. And then this is what's kind of left from it. Or this is now the UNESCO World Heritage, maybe the thing that's the most famous thing about our city, which is often said to be the prettiest coal mine in the world. And luckily it's defunct. So that means it's not polluting anymore. So you can go there for a nice walk, for a museum, and the air is clean even in winter. And we have some friends who are obviously having a good time now that there's not so much pollution anymore. So yeah, isn't that what we should just do? Go from fossils to not fossils? But then usually we talk about CO2 emissions, which is important for the Paris Agreement and global warming. But at the same time, there's many more reasons to go away from fossils. So first of all, it destroys a lot of nature. So this is a different kind of coal mining. It's lignite mining, also in the west of Germany, where you basically just dig out open pits, destroy villages, cities, forests. Burning fossils, well, leads to very bad air pollution. I mean, you saw this on the first photo from 1910. You see this still in a lot of places, especially in large developing metropolises. This is also true for other forms of mining, even for cleaner types of energy like nuclear. These uranium mines. This is one in Namibia. They tend to be up to 1 kilometer deep. So these are humongous, destructions or alterations of nature. And at the same time, maybe the ugliest face of all, the one of Putin, which also shows us that a lot of fossils are being used to fund wars and bring not only destruction to nature, but also to people. So we should just go for renewables, right? But it might not necessarily be much better in these terms. And there's a lot of ugly sides of it as well. For instance, when you look at what needs to be done for mining lithium for batteries, often this is done in South America, and this is often on indigenous lands where in very dry areas, lithium mining uses up most of the water and pollutes it, such that it's not available for local communities. Yeah, that's right. Oh, maybe switch. But we don't have to go that far as to South America. We can also look at Norway. I'm sure most of you are aware of the Fosen wind park, where it was an unlawfully built wind park on Sami reindeer herding land. So that's about indigenous people, but also for maybe people who just don't want any transmission lines or wind parks in their neighborhood. And this is a huge issue, and it really stops a lot of projects in this way as well. This is a photo from Germany where a big transmission line between the south and the industrial south and the windy north cannot be built. And lastly, there's also human rights issues, apart from the ones that I've mentioned earlier, but there's child labor and other types of modern day slavery also used for batteries. So these are, of course, issues that can be solved, but unfortunately, the time is really pressing. So we need to figure these things out very quickly. And you probably know the right warning stripes. Maybe some of you have also seen the left biodiversity stripes that really shows how we're destroying nature and killing our biodiversity, apart from really heating up the planet. Now let me get to the science part, or maybe my science part. So as I said, I work with energy system modeling, and these models that we work with, they can describe the transition to a future renewable energy system that satisfies our needs, so that we can actually do what we're currently doing, ideally, maybe less. And we can additionally put some constraints on these systems. And usually this is done through setting up a model and then trying to optimize the costs of it. So we like putting things in equations. So this is a simplified model of them. So you can think about trying to describe the system, and then what we do is we look at all the different decisions that are possible, and we try to assign some costs to it, and the goal is to minimize the costs over all possible decisions. And then, well, we have some energy demand that needs to be met. So this is here. We can use more area that is available. And then the kind of model and the system needs to be consistent in itself. So we need to respect the laws of physics. We cannot have more storage that we had yesterday and that's saved up since yesterday today. We cannot discharge than we have, and many more. And just to make it even more massier, no, it's just the only slide, don't worry. Usually this is formulated as a linear program. There's a linear objective function that I showed earlier, and linear constraints, because that makes it easier to solve these things. And this is how just a few of these equations can look like in practice. But there's actually billions of them, and I don't really want to dwell on it, because otherwise you'll definitely need a pint to drink after this. Cool. So, as I said, I think it's important to remember that there's a lot of different disciplines that go into this, and just to describe what kind of disciplines go into this, just set up the model. So there's a lot of economics in there. This is a techno-economical model. Implicitly, there's also information about how markets work. There is quite a bit of climate science that goes in there, and its share is actually increasing because it's just so important. At the same time, renewable systems are very much dependent on weather, so meteorology, and putting this and translating this into something that we can put in models is very important. Social science is increasingly becoming important, since this field comes a bit more from economists and engineers. This has been quite slow, but it's picking up. We also have things about land use, environmental protection in there. Of course, since there's a lot of different technologies involved, that's also part of the equations, the model, and assumptions, and there's many more that didn't fit on the slide. So just to kind of give you an idea on how my usual day looks like. So, we have all these different sciences, but then in the end, we just sit alone in our office in front of the computer. This is some code snapshot from from some previous paper. Then you write these things, and then you need these big machines, high performance computing to solve these big equations. You try to do this, and you then run it, hope for the best, and then usually run into an error. And then you spend weeks and weeks trying to debug these errors. And then maybe you'll run it and you'll solve something. And then, since models always describe the world perfectly, you have found the optimal solution. So what are we talking about? Well, this is not quite how it works. And just the mathematical formulation leads to you only get one solution, which is based on a lot of assumption, a lot of guesswork, a lot of projections, a lot of uncertainty. So actually, one could argue maybe you don't actually know that much, but luckily it's not as bad. But we need to improve the things we're doing. So this is often done by really trying to quantify the uncertainties, and that's something that I've been working quite a bit with. Just to mention some of the uncertainty and things that might actually go wrong with such a solution that we get out. Since we're often looking at systems that are in 2050, we have very big cost uncertainty. Over the last years, technology for renewable energy sources has become very cheap, much cheaper than a lot of people expected. So looking 20 years ahead or 25 years ahead is very difficult. We also don't know how quickly climate change is going to progress. There are, of course, the feedback loops, but things also happen much quicker than we hoped they would do. There's technological development as well. What are the things that are going to be available? We always talk about hydrogen and how big a role it's going to play, but then needs to be economical in the end. We need to scale up a lot of things, and that leads to difficulties as well. I mentioned the impact of meteorology on weather variability is really, really a big thing. When you look at wind power, solar power, which are projected to be a huge deal of the future. And then in the end, we need to implement these things that we're trying to change, and then social acceptance issues, and they need to be politically feasible as well. So my humble contribution was to work with these things. And one major part was trying to introduce a methodology that is able to go beyond these single solutions and find solutions that actually can deal with different uncertainties and try to be more robust against them. So these solutions are called near optimal solutions, and that means they still work, which is good, but they're just slightly more expensive, but might have other features that are preferable. So, for instance, I talked about weather variability, and if you just use as input data for these models different weather years, so these are the last, or some of the last 40, 45 years, then you really see that the costs vary, like a lot, and it really depends on the weather year, what technologies we would invest in. And since we're building systems for decades, that's not going to be enough to just look at one. So we've done this. And then actually what turns out, I'm not going to go too much into this, but you can just think about usually we would get just one point, like the red dot here, as a solution, but actually we have a lot of different solutions that we could do. They're all not so expensive and not so bad. And maybe they have some better qualities that we would like to focus on. And even when we vary different assumptions, like for instance, the costs for different technologies, we still find a lot of things that work for different scenarios. Maybe we should try to, kind of hedge against different uncertainties that we're working with. Okay, let's see. Well, another thing is that what we're trying to do that's a bit more difficult, just like IT, is trying to find decisions that also work on different levels. Because a lot of the things we're looking at are from a European perspective, but in the end, a lot of the policies are implemented on a national level. And then we're also trying to see, can we find different decisions that help others achieve the things. I actually see that unfortunately the color scale in the bottom is not there, so I'm not going to talk too much about this topic, but basically there are certain in regions that give others more choice to react to it. Whereas if certain regions focus on one technology, it's possible that they really lock in other actors in very small maneuvering spaces. And the last thing that we're currently very interested in is to look at extreme weather events. We talk a lot about weather extremes with regards to climate change, but these don't actually necessarily have to be the same as those that are very extreme for the energy system. And basically, through all the different interconnections, something that's very extreme in one region can spread, but at the same time, if something is very extreme in one region, maybe the transmission can help to really alleviate these issues. So it turns out that it's actually very difficult to really know which kind of weather patterns make our future system really safe, reliable, and when we could run into big issues. These are just some maps of some observations that we've made or from some meteorologist that works with us. On the left-hand side, you see temperature anomalies, so everything that's blue is quite cold. That's a pattern usually if it's not windy, which is, for instance, the blue anomalies here. And if it's cold, that's the perfect storm, or rather, there's no storm, so we have no wind in the winter. It's cold, we have high demand, and then we run into issues. But that's what we're trying to figure out, and we don't know yet how this is going to play out. But that's work in progress. Maybe just to wrap up. Maybe the takeaway messages are not what I'm doing, but maybe the takeaway messages should be what you can do. First of all, for everybody who here is in some sort of field of research, then it would be good if we could learn from you as well. And we've seen that this is very fruitful for us. And then maybe as individual citizens, it's really important to also demand that both society, but also the politicians, make informed and responsible decisions. We cannot export all the impacts. We've seen a lot of these human rights, environmental issues in other places, so that we can feel good about ourselves transitioning to green energy. We're going to talk about greenwashing later. So we will not go through this transition without having to accept certain things that might be inconvenient or not aesthetic or kind of unpleasant. We've made this world for the future quite unpleasant already. So we need to do something also on the local levels. And for everybody, not as a citizen, but just as an individual, it's also important to be aware of the choices we make, the lifestyles we lead. And if we really want to have something that has no footprint or the lowest footprint, we should just try to in this context, save energy, because then we don't need to transition this energy from fossils to renewables. And hopefully this will make it slightly less grim. I tried to make this a bit more cheerful, but otherwise, grab a beer from the bar. Then you're gonna be more cheerful and cheers.
We're gonna have questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You really got to appreciate someone who comments that code properly. I think you noticed that. That's good. So we have some time for a couple of questions for Alexander. Yes. Can't reach that far. You just have to speak up. Oh, wait, we can reach that far.
Tack. Okay. Nice topic. So I'm very interested in kind of the principle you talked about in modeling, when you're comparing like political issues, human rights, climate models. I mean, so when you're doing this sum you showed us, or when you're modeling this, you have to kind of move all of these different variables into the same space. So it makes sense to kind of compare a storm with a political crisis, kind of, or you have to have a way that you can connect those. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a very good and a very difficult question, because usually these models, they work with costs. So you're trying to really quantify everything, huh? But you can't quantify everything. So sometimes you need to find some sort of proxies that could maybe translate things to social costs, for instance. But you also just have to be honest about it. You can't put everything in a model. So these models, they can be good for informing kind of stakeholders, but then you read this is a starting point, and then you have to really evaluate it on a also qualitative basis. You can't do everything. That answers your question.
Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, why don't you speak up and then we'll repeat the question.
I have a question about these uncertainties when you want to find out the ranges of different scenarios that can establish themselves. We're talking about near optimal solutions. Maybe this is too technical, but to what extent does this differ from computing your model multiple times on parameter settings?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. Okay. Well, the main difficulty with any sort of uncertainty analysis in this context is that these models are quite large. It really takes a lot of time to run things. So if you ran for different parameters, as you say, then you can really just pick a few parameters, which are also based on guesswork, and then you do it. But and you can do this, and this works really well for some things. But in the end, you still get just different snapshots, which gives you different point estimates of the cost optimum there. But how this differs a bit is we also make some assumptions. So we change some parameters. For instance, a set of parameters in that sense would be taking just the different weather years with a lot of different inputs on time and space. And then what we do is we really try to describe in certain variables the space so that you can not only see one solution, but all the different deviations from it that are possible. So instead of just putting a lot of things or the focus on the inputs and how they change things, you can see just by looking at near optimal solutions how many things you can change in the outputs. And then if you additionally change some things in the inputs, you can see under which inputs can we change certain outputs, which gives you kind of all the different choices you can have that work with all the different inputs. It's a bit more technical. Happy to chat about it afterwards. But I hope the gist is clear that you can kind of wiggle things in the input and wiggle things in the outputs and still see things that work for both.
Okay, we got time for one more question, and then the speakers will be available later.
Yes.
Later. The speakers will be available later as well. One more question, anyone? No? Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and go from sort of the big picture here to a much more local focus on the energy transition. So 10 minutes, we're going to be here support our host, and we'll be right back. Let's get another, yeah, there you go. I turn this back on. For Augie? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pine of Science. Everyone gotten another drink? Everyone's excited. We just heard about kind of the big picture, like how policy and all sorts of different things enter into a global scale. Our next speaker, Mehdi, is going to be talking about what's more a local scale. What can we do in our neighborhood, in our personal lives? Yeah. Read the description right. So I'm going to stop talking and let our scientists speak.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mehdi from my desk, all the day sitting in front of my desk. So, in the informatics department at the UIO. And for the person that's sitting behind his desk all the days, I'm kind of boring scientific. So, it's really hard to present something, grab attention, and be some funny things. So I try my best to provide this presentation to not be so boring. So first, I produced this picture from generative AI, so like ChatGPT, to make it some fancy. Okay, let's just start. So today I want to talk about the local energy system. What that means, it means that uh, using some let's distance using some resources like PV panels in your roof or other small scale generation like microturbines. So you can have the energy in your home. So you don't need to depend on the larger scale resources, depend on the utilities. So my research is how to take the control of your consumption, how to produce energy for your consumptions. And for doing that, we facing a lot of challenges. I think last year you feel the pain of these bills. So if we can somehow manage our consumption and have our own production, so we don't need electricity bill. It's a good, good imaginations, and we'd love to have all the controls and don't worry about the fluctuation, about the war or something happen outside of home. Just want to be just thinking about also how we can take the whole control of my consumption, maybe my PV panels to don't have the same situations. And I think it was really painful. Okay. The good thing is that in Norway we have a lot of hydropower. Hydropower, I think around 95 or 98 percent of the electricity consumption comes from the hydropower. So if we just have some more renewable energy in local area, we can be some national that our power is come from renewable energy. It's a good imaginations, but let's go through the challenges. And the another things about the Norway is the good spirit of the people here. They are really love to be sustainable. For example, you can see the Oslo plan for being reducing his consumption to 95% in 2023. So it's a big goals. And also you can see the electric vehicles here, all the Norway is not like other countries. So this is the good potential that people really want to be sustainable, to have a good impact on the society. And Even I think maybe next year, Santa comes with electric slate because everyone here is using the electric vehicles. But yeah, we now if everything is green and we use green energy, it's a fantastic future, and it's help our next generations, helping other countries. We are connecting to other countries and selling the green energy. But seems for near future is kind of impossible if we cannot address the challenges. We should face the reality, face the difficulties, and solve these difficulties to make this fantastic future to happen. So the first challenge is the money. It's like other problems. The first challenge every time is the money, because when you want to install your PV panels, you have to invest a lot of money, and return money maybe it could be 10 years. So most of the people don't have this money to invest in the renewable energy. So, so we need somehow to think that how make this investment more profitable and reduce this return years. For example, 10 years to 3 years. One idea is that using some energy sharing framework that instead of just having PV panel for your own consumption or selling to the grid, you can sell your energy to others, to your neighbors. That way, you can make money with your PV panels. So when this is more profitable PV panels, and the return money can be reduced from 10 years, for example, to 5 years. But this what means this energy sharing and how it can be happen. Consider a local area. Each one of some house have PV panels, some house also storages. Sometimes they don't need the energy, but the neighbors for some reason don't have PV panels. Maybe they are in the shadow, they cannot install PV panels and needs the energy. So they can sell the energy to that neighbors. And it's a really simple idea, but when we go to the technical levels, we're facing a lot of challenges. The first challenge is that we have to make this framework autonomous. I mean, I like to install PV panels. I like to share it with my neighbors. I don't like every morning be worry about now how I can sell it to my neighbors. How can I manage it every time thinking about these things? So everything should be autonomous and intelligent. So my study is that how make this energy sharing autonomous and intelligent. For that, sorry, yeah, we have some idea that, for example, I'm the user of these systems. So I express my preferences. Today, I want energy for this timer slot. For example, washing machine, it should be turned on at that time. And also, my preferences is to use some sustainable energy. For example, for using the PV panels. And also, I care about the money. So all of these expressions go to the okay. Go to the one generative AI like ChatGPT. It's ChatGPT is kind of generative AI, and it's this generative AI translate our language, these preferences to some quantify parameters. And when we have these parameters, we give this parameter to our optimization model. thanks to the Alex, he talked about the optimization model. His optimization model is the time resolution is about the years, I think, but my time resolution is about the day. So it's about operation. So it's similar to Alex model, but the resolution and some variable is different. My variable is when to consume the energy, when to produce energy, when to store energy in a day. And then the result go to the generative AI to get feedback how to correct, if how to improve his response, and the results goes to user to evaluate his decisions. And yeah, this is my kind of optimization model. But there is a really important issue here. When we have a lot of distributed resources that every household, for example, can its own management, own resources, and we want to be take the control of everything, then we have problem in the operation. And that time, operation manager will be very upset how to manage this complexity, how to be sure that everyone have the energy. So this is the really challenges. For solving these challenges, we use some techniques that call sensitivity analysis. Using this sensitivity analysis, we can determine which household use has more impact on the transmission line. So if something bad happen like congestions or other things, we can correct the consumption or the production. I think I should push it very hard. It's not working gently. And another thing is the privacy. So I told you we need some autonomous platform to do everything. For doing that, we need a lot of data. So sharing data can be dangerous because when you share your consumption data, it's tell everything about you. When you leave your home, how it's your social lifestyle. For example, you are awake late or something like. So it tell you everything about you. So it's really important to develop some framework that preserve privacy of the household. And we have really issues in this part. So I'm trying to, in my optimization model incorporate some privacy models like differential privacy to help increase the privacy in our framework, which is very hard. Yeah. Yeah, I told you. Then when you all the day sitting in front of your PC, it's really hard to really hard your keys. I have the roles. So it's like that. Nice work. I don't know why, but it's good. But for that part, we are quantify the parameters. I use some concept or some concept from finance. It's mental accounting. How people decide when they have to choose between the items. Here in the local system energy, we have different items. We just I want to consume energy. People can have preferences like hospital. They need some reliable sources. Some people maybe go for green energy. Some people care about the prices. So how to we consider all of these preferences in our model? So for that, it is my next level study. I developed that privacy part. So it's using the mental accounting when the people should decide about the items together, how they value them. and how we can incorporate this value in our optimization model. And let's go behind of this model. I mean, show the exact picture I use in my papers. Here we have our physical layer is the power system. This is the layer that system operator is very careful about it, because the physical layer we have losses, we have some congestion, and it's really important to we have feasible transaction between the neighbors. So here I use that sensitivity analysis, but in the upper layer that's related to the people, we have three layers. That one of layer is social platform. That's our mental accounting model should work here. The how we model people preferences. And in upper layer, we have agent platforms. That in agent platform, it's we use some AI techniques. More specifically, we use reinforcement learning to make autonomous decisions, and we incorporate differential privacy in our AI techniques to keep privacy of people. And in upper layer, we have P2P trading between neighbors. So it's like auction market. People and they bid or ask. But let's talk more about the climate change, not just local energy system. I think the challenges related to engineering, we are we have a lot of models that can solve our issues. We can solve privacy. We can solve optimizations. I think a lot of we have a lot of university and they have a lot of PhD students every year. We hire PhD students to develop some new models that is better than the previous ones, and because we want to publish the papers, so we have a lot of models, and I think all of them can solve the problem we have in the technical levels, like using AI, privacy, and I think that's enough. But the main problem is our law. I mean, we don't have developed concept that can guide uh, how we can use this model. I mean, we just sit in our desk developing new models, so and said that, oh, it's have better performances. But previous model never used in real life, in real platform. I think the time is to use the models, maybe simple models. Maybe they don't need my model, like my advanced model. We can start with some simple models, but before that, we need to solve some serious issues. Like we need some clear guides. How what is our plan for 5 next years? How politicians want to decide to move forward? How should we develop our regulations based on these models? And also social studies. We need to consider people, how they think, how they want this, if they want this local energy trading or not. So I'm thinking that we need to more emphasize first to implement even our simple models that a lot of PhD students develop. And then another step is to ask our politicians to make clear decisions, make clear paths for these things. We need to solve these issues. Even I can successfully develop this model and say, yeah, it is fantastic result. I can solve complexity of the operation. I can solve the privacy. Why cannot, if it cannot be implemented, it will be forgotten and it will be just in the papers for citations. So I really support that climate risk can be some action for this climate change. And I think it's really important because when we talk about the sustainability, talk about the climate change, it's about the future. And wealth is not just the money. Wealth is about having safe life, having the perfect life, good life, and it's really important to think about these things. And again, I should hard. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We have time for questions. Who's got questions about how you can make an impact and be part of the energy transition? Yes.
Don't you lose a lot of energy transporting it to your neighbor and the other neighbor? And so does it take it into account? Is it worth it?
I couldn't understand
Oh, is it worth it?
to do the local energy trading. Yeah. I mean, for now, okay. Yeah, for now, the platform we have is that household they sell the energy to the grid. It's a very lower price that they buy energy from the grid. So if we have sharing energy between the neighbors, they can sell or buy energy at the same level. So people they have renewable energy and make more money with installing the PV panels. And then when selling the money, the power, they earn the money, so they can cover the cost of installing the PV panels and make more money. I hope. Yeah, we have the same grid. We don't need to develop new grids. That's the good things, and so people have to pay fees for using the grid. That's
Okay, so we got another question over this way.
Hello. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you did talk about this, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but rather than individual households having their own energy systems, what if like a block of flats or a commune had their own energy system? Is that another way of doing it, or would that be more complicated or less feasible because then it would be clear who was using what, or are there barriers to that?
Yeah, exactly. In the local energy system, the size can be varied. For example, a household or a university campus can be a community, or a hospital, a big hospital can be a community. All of the people in societies that are located in the rural area, in the cities, can be part of this local energy system.
Okay, we got time for one more question. All the questions from the organizers.
Hi, though I know most of your work, but still I have remember if you have users is the distributed federal line or something because you are staying for the privacy.
Yeah.
You are only using, I don't know, but is it because for the sharing you have distributed from one house to one house. What I was looking for developing model to it house that you don't have to share the data. So are you thinking about it or something?
Yeah. One of the issue is that when we have a centralized operator that we have now, we have a retailer, they can forecast the weathers, the consumption, the productions. So they use a forecasting model. But when we have the household, it's really hard for them to forecast these things. So they can share the models with the federated learning, and then accumulated models can do the forecasting using the federated learning. Yeah, but it's called behind my PhD because I have 3 years PhD.
Great. Thank you so much, Mehdi. Mehdi and our other speakers will be around during the break. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So again, support our host and chat, and let's give another round of applause. All right, come on back. What? Well, we got, yeah. Oh. Couple minutes, come on back.
Couple minutes.
Well, our tech guy is not here at the moment. There he is. Hey. All right, we're all set? All right, welcome back to our third and final presenter. We've had a couple talks about some global solutions and some local solutions. And now one of our organizers, Sian, is going to talk about maybe not actual solutions. Yeah. I said maybe not actual solutions. Take it away. Yeah, turn your thing up.
Yeah, maybe solution, maybe not. So I did choose a very provocative title for this talk. So CCS, if you don't know, that's carbon capture and storage, or as a reminder, if you forgot. And I chose the provocative title, is this a greenwashing gimmick or is it a critical climate strategy? And I think, as a lot of things are at the moment, there's a lot of polarizing debates online and in the community and in general. So I'm going to talk about the science and some of the political factors associated with whether this is feasible, implemented, cost, because as we've already seen from our previous speakers, there are so many variables that go into all of the various scenarios for these types of things and the various solutions. But I'm going to specifically zoom in on this one solution, carbon capture and storage. But full disclosure, I am, yes, my name is Sean and I'm a researcher at the University of Oslo and I research CCS. So, I'm probably not going to end this talk by saying, yeah, it's terrible, let's just abandon that and do something else. So let's get started. So I know this isn't going to be a talk that just bombards you with graph after graph after graph, but I did want to start it with a graph because I first want us to get a feel for the scale of the problem we are facing in terms of CO2 emissions. So at the moment, just a number that I'm going to throw out there, we emit about 35 gigatons of CO2 per year. That's globally. So everyone in the world, or actually just over that now. And that's 35 billion tons. So this is just, incomprehensible numbers that we're thinking about here, just absolutely enormous volumes. And you can see in the breakdown here, I think I have the laser pointer. Yeah, so we have this breakdown in this nice pie chart. And unsurprisingly, you can see the vast majority of that CO2 is being emitted because we are generating energy primarily from burning fossil fuels. And we do have some other uses that generate CO2 as well. Agriculture, we have some waste and heavy industries. But really, the huge proportion of this is we are just addicted to energy now. So since the discovery of fossil fuels and the Industrial Revolution, a lot of us have benefited in our way of life from this. So actually, we have pretty nice lives now, thanks to the energy that's readily available for all of us, that goes into making the things we use, powering all the appliances that we have, and it's pretty much helped us have a nice quality of life in many places of the world. But we now know, unfortunately, there is a side effect of that. And that's that CO2, actually in small quantities, even though it's an inert gas, it doesn't do much, in such huge quantities, it is warming the planet because it has this greenhouse effect, unfortunately. So I'm a geologist, so I look at things on million-year timescales. And if I read Twitter threads about climate change, which I try not to because it's a harrowing place out there, but if I do, one of the arguments I often see is climate change is natural. Climate change happens all the time. Think about geological timescales. Climate change is so natural. The Earth's been way hotter than it has been today. All of that is true, by the way. But what we're really not thinking about is that we didn't exist back then when the Earth was that hot. Neither did many of the other species that currently inhabit this planet. And the rate of change currently is not a rate of change that's particularly friendly to plant species, animal species that are currently inhabiting this planet. So yeah, so what if the Earth was way hotter during the Cretaceous? None of us existed then, and we wouldn't survive in the Cretaceous. So that's not really going to help us with the problem that we have today. But if we just zoom in on the last little bit of that graph there, so this is just the Holocene, and this is the last part of the graph where you really can see the effect of the current warming. So we were in this little ice age dip that we have been, and now thanks to our current CO2 emissions and also methane and some other contributions from greenhouse gases, we are absolutely shooting up now. And the rate of change on geological timescales, the only other time we would have seen a rate of change like this was probably during the meteorite impact about 66 million years ago. And that didn't go so well for the dominant species at the time. So I'm not sure that's a super good sign for us, you know. So we do see, associated with some of these spikes on our geological timescales, that mass extinctions coincide with that. So apart from trying to fight trolls on Twitter, which I personally don't because I just don't have the energy, a lot of these things that people say are quite easily debunked when you actually look into the science and speak to geologists. So yeah, what can we actually do about this? So there are lots and lots of buzzwords on the scene now. You know, everyone is aware that climate change is a problem. You'd have to be living under a rock not to know about that at this stage. And there are a whole host of proposed climate solutions out there now. And all of these buzzwords, energy transition, net zero, decarbonization, we're going carbon negative, carbon neutral, clean energy, renewable energy, sustainable energy, all of the above. We want everything and we want it all at once and we need it now. But it's hard to actually break through all of this noise to actually what is happening underneath that. So for a lot of companies, they see this as a business opportunity. Of course, climate change is fashionable now. We're gonna be green. We're gonna say that we're doing all of this green stuff. Say that our products are green. Say that we're going net zero. You know, or use all of the buzzwords. Put it all on the advertising, and we'll be good. And yeah, of course, that's what we call greenwashing. And it's really hard to dig out, what's actually effective and what's being done well, and what people are putting on as a front because they see this more as a business opportunity than a real problem that they're trying to solve underneath. But I am going to zoom in on one particular proposed solution to this, which I said at the start, and that is this idea of carbon capture and storage, CCS, aka. So this is just the simple schematic. If I go back to the laser pointer, the idea of carbon capture and storage is very simple. It's quite compelling. We basically take the carbon, rather than putting it up into the atmosphere, we will capture it at the point source, or we will try to draw it out of the atmosphere, but that's much, much more difficult. Better if we can capture it at the source when the carbon is created. Compress it into what we'd call a supercritical fluid. So that's that weird phase that's not quite a gas and not quite a liquid. And then we'll take it, and instead of putting it in the atmosphere, we'll follow this pipeline and we'll inject it into the rocks. Never to be seen again or heard from again, hopefully. So that's what's happening down here. And so then we have these three phases, three components: carbon, we need to collect it, we need to transport it, and we need to store it. So because I'm a geologist, I'm obviously leaning towards the storage aspect of this. And so I'm trying to find rocks that are suitable for CO2 storage and also understand the processes that act when we inject CO2 into these rocks, and whether that can be safe, whether it can be effective, whether it can be a long-term solution for what we do with our CO2, which is effectively waste disposal. And a lot of people, if you're not a geologist, you probably don't think a lot about the world under our feet on a day-to-day basis, especially not when it's way offshore, which is generally what we're dealing with carbon storage. We're not looking to put it in someone's back garden. We really do want it out the way, out of sight, out of mind. So we're going way offshore and then way underground. And there's not a big empty cavern under there that's just waiting to be filled with CO2. It ends up filling the pore space in the rock. So this picture shows that quite nicely with these little brown grains, and that black stuff in between those is the tiny, tiny holes between the grains, which we're going to then try and fill up with CO2 when we inject it underground. So Norway has actually been a little bit ahead of the curve on this for some time now, because they actually started doing CCS back in 1996. So we kind of think because CCS has so much momentum now that it's a new solution, but actually we have known about this for a little while. It just didn't really have the urgency that it has now that we are throwing anything and everything at the problem, basically. So Norway started doing CCS at one of its oil fields called Sleipner, which is this one down here. So this is in the North Sea just here. And they started doing that because of the taxes that were implemented at the time. So they thought an easy way to avoid paying tax on this CO2 is we'll just inject that straight back down. And now this is a solution that's obviously looking to be implemented more widely. There was then a second site up here a bit later on. It's called Snøhvit. That's way, way up north. And now that it's really gaining momentum, we are looking to implement this full chain proof of the CCS concept, essentially. So this is what we call the Northern Lights project down here, which is they're going to take 2 point sources initially, so a cement factory and a waste to energy facility from in Oslo and also down here nearby. Transport these via ship initially all the way around the coast up to here, which is near Bergen. And then we're going to pipe it offshore and then pump it underground where it shouldn't bother us or bother the warming in the atmosphere again. So the Northern Lights project is a partnership between several oil companies, of course. Oil companies being the ones that have dealt with the offshore for many, many decades already, but also the ones that, kind of got us into this problem in the first place, knowingly or unknowingly. But they do have the knowledge and they have the funding and they have the infrastructure. And so they are kind of the ones who are well placed to do this process, at least in the initial phases. But coming back to CCS, I have I'm skipping ahead a little bit because I first wanted to say the scale on these graphs is also a bit weird. So these nice cartoons, they kind of show us, okay, yeah, we're going to take it here, we're going to do this here, but they don't really have a scale on them, and it's difficult to tell the scale from this. So get a feel for the distance scales involved. CO2 has to be stored safely at least 800 meters underground. So the Burj Khalifa, conveniently, which is the tallest building in the world, unless the one in China has just beat it, because I think they're trying to beat it, but until very recently at least, is the tallest building in the world. And that happens to be just over 800 meters tall. So what we want to do is we go the distance of the Burj Khalifa, but we're going to go down instead of up into the subsurface. And not just that, because we actually have the sea on top of that as well, of course. That can be a few hundred meters. So the Eiffel Tower is about 300 meters. So stick the Eiffel Tower on top of the Burj Khalifa, and that's about the distance that we've actually got to go down into the earth before we start injecting our CO2. So this is a very heavy engineering problem, super expensive, obviously, and it's kind of at it's the limits of what we can do going up into the sky, and arguably it's even more difficult when we're trying to go down into the earth. But because we've been doing this to exploit oil and gas for a while, we actually kind of have a pretty good starting point to go for this process. But it kind of begs the question, how on earth do we even know what is going on at least 800 meters in the ground and also several kilometers offshore? And we have a process as geologists that we've developed specifically for this purpose, to look underground. And that's this seismic data, which is essentially an X-ray. But in this case, we are not X-raying people to look at their skeletons, but we take an X-ray of the Earth instead. So this would be me, this little cartoon with my curly hair up there, sitting in my little boat and wondering what the hell is underneath my feet. I have no way of knowing, unless I go out there in
a seismic acquisition boat where we're going to send sound waves down into the Earth, which then reflect off all of these little internal boundaries within the Earth itself. And they reflect back up to the surface where they're then received by these receivers conveniently, which are also being dragged along by the seismic acquisition boat. We can also collect seismic passively as well. So we can use natural earthquakes and things like that that naturally send sound waves through the Earth. And we can pick up on those and create images. But if we have an active source for the depth we're looking at, that tends to be a lot higher resolution than if we just waited for an earthquake to happen and listened out for it. So this is the most common tool that we use to look at what's going on underground and try to work out, would this actually be a good site for CO2 injection? What rocks are down there? What's going to happen when we pump it in? And most importantly, will it stay there? Will it be safe? Will it be stored? And the subsurface is not that simple, actually. It's not just a layer cake down there. We can see on this example, we have all these kinds of crazy structures. Things can be faulted, things can be folded. You have all different rock types down there. So it's important to really know what we are drilling into, first of all, and also what we're potentially injecting into, secondly. And not all rocks are equal. That's why we need to know what's going down there. I actually did bring 2 rocks with me as a bit of a show and tell. So maybe I'll just do that before I show this little video. This is what we call sandstone. So this is beaches basically. And if we feel that, does someone want to give that a rub? Is it smooth or rough? Yeah, it's pretty rough, right? And then I have the second show and tell. If you compare that, tell me what the texture feels like. It's really smooth, right? Okay. So these are the 2 rocks that we need for CO2 storage. I won't make you hold those. That's okay. I'll take that back. But this is essentially, these rough rocks are the sands that have this really good space between the pores. That's why they feel rough. So we can inject the fluid into this pretty nicely, and it's kind of like a sponge. It will take that okay. And then what we need is something that's not going to let it out. So on top of that sponge, we need something that's going to prevent it going upwards. So we need a cap on that, which are these really tight rocks. They feel really smooth, and they are mudstones. So those are the 2 key elements that we really need before we want to be injecting anything down there. A sponge that will hold the fluids, and then a cap that won't let those fluids escape, which is what we're looking for. And I do have a nice video that will introduce this process a little bit, if I can get the link to work. Yes, okay, just an advert first. Talk amongst yourselves. This was actually a model that was made at the University of Bergen. So as much as I hate to plug Bergen, an Oslo event, I am going to accept that actually this is quite cool and quite a good visual to show. So this yellow stuff here, so this yellow stuff being injecting here, that's representing the CO2. This is just literally a box of sand, but it's sands of different grain sizes. And as they're pumping in this yellow stuff here, representing the CO2, you can see it will try to go upwards. And then if it meets a barrier, it will start to flow along. So in this case, there's some impermeable barrier coming in there. That could be one of our mudstones. And then the CO2 is just going to start flowing along that. However, it has found here that it can get up. And so it's got up there and it started flowing along here. And then you can see it's starting to find little pathways along here and managing to spread out here. But we do have this nice tight rock here over the top of it that's not letting that CO2 out. So this is a much shorter time scale than our geological time scale. But in reality, the CO2 would take a lot longer than this to migrate. And it could take hundreds of years just to go a few kilometers. And that's if we have quite a spongy rock that we can travel fast. If we have a tighter rock, which is going to slow it down even more, it will take thousands of years. So it will be thousands of years before we can even see where the CO2 is going to end up. So we are trying to predict something that's actually on quite long timescales here. And we as geologists, feel a bit hot when we have to go, okay, yes, it's definitely going to be fine for thousands and thousands of years. But the thing is, we kind of have been doing this for a while, again, because of oil and gas.
we've got pretty good at saying where the sands and shales are and how things are going to flow in the subsurface. So again, we have some knowledge we can build off because of the oil and gas industry, and potentially be able to leverage that now in one of these new solutions like CCS. If I go back to my slides, I need to go full screen. Oh yeah, there we go. Is that the right slide? Yeah. Okay, but not everything always goes perfectly to plan. So we as geologists, we are pretty good at this now. I'm going to say we're pretty good at this. But we don't predict everything that well. There is inherently some uncertainty in the subsurface because we are dealing with things that are kilometers offshore and kilometers underground, and we're using this X-ray method to image them. I wish we could have the precision of a skeleton X-ray where you can see every little fracture in the bone, but actually when we are imaging the subsurface, we're dealing with tens of meters resolution. And I spoke to a guy about this who was dealing with burning hydrogen, and he's like a physicist, and he looks at burning hydrogen. So he's like doing really precise models of the flames of hydrogen and how they're burned. And I told him, like, we deal with precision of about tens of meters. And you can imagine his mind just exploded. Like, you have no idea what's going on down there. Oh my gosh, we should cancel this whole thing. This is terrible. But as geologists, we've got to a place where we're quite comfortable with an uncertainty of tens of meters now. Tens of meters feels pretty good to a lot of us, actually, if we can be that sure about the distances. But if things do go wrong, if we think we're going to find a sand and we accidentally found a shale, or the sand wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be, so we start injecting and the pressure builds up too much because we didn't have as much space as we thought we were going to have, sometimes things do go wrong in that way. And so if you look into some of the CCS projects online, for example, you'll find ones that tried pilot testing and they didn't go to plan. But that's kind of the same with all technologies when they're in their early phases and we're on a bit of a learning curve at the moment. And it just means that if the pressure builds up too much, we stop injecting. We don't want to build it up to the point where we accidentally frack the rock. That's something entirely different. We're not trying to do that with CO2 at all. And so some projects, they injected, they found the pressure was building up too much. They didn't want to frack and they switched it off. And there are people who will point at that and go, look, it doesn't work at all. This is proof. We just need to kill it with fire and kill it now. But actually, this is every time something goes wrong, we actually learn from it. We can make a better prediction the next time as well. And there are successful CCS projects as well. We tend to focus on the ones that didn't go exactly as we hoped. But for example, the Snøhvit CCS injection, which is one of Norway's CCS projects, which I showed before, they initially injected into a sand that was smaller than they thought. They saw the pressure was building up, and then they thought, okay, no worries, we've got a plan B. We're going to inject into this sand that's a bit shallower instead. Still at a safe depth, but this is a shallower one. And then they've been injecting there without much problem ever since. So we can build plan Bs into this to account for that uncertainty. We really carefully monitor the pressure down there. We don't just keep injecting and twiddle our thumbs and don't worry about it. We have pretty good methods of watching what's going down there as well. And what's the worst that could happen then? Okay, let's say everything goes wrong. Worst scenario, what does that look like? So let's say we had a scenario. I've made a really colorful diagram here. I don't know why I decided to make it rainbow colored, but let's say these arrows are the CO2 that's being injected and where it's flowing. And let's say we made a really bad prediction, bad geologists. We didn't spot that there was a fault there, or we thought the fault was going to be sealing and it isn't. So now the CO2 is actually leaking up along the fault. Maybe a mistake like that could be made in 1% of projects or something like that. Depends how good your geologists are, obviously. But for good geologists, let's say, make that mistake in 1% of projects or even less. I don't actually have real numbers for that, but rarely we miss a huge structure like that. And in the worst case scenario, the CO2 is traveling up that fault and it's leaking a bit. Well, we do have a nice natural analog for that, actually, because CO2, naturally occurring CO2, not man-made CO2, is actually leaking at a site along a fault in Utah already. geologists have been studying this pretty heavily. I think this has a biogenic source, the CO2 in this case, but it's found a little leak up the fault. And this is Crystal Giza in Utah, which is now a bit of a tourist attraction. And this attraction actually exists because CO2 is leaking along this fault, and it's starting to bubble up at the surface a little bit. So in the worst case scenario, we get a bit of CO2 that escaped, and it's now bubbling up at the surface. But modeling quantities for this kind of scenario shows that it's the equivalent of a couple of fields of cows in annual greenhouse gas effect. So actually, our worst case scenario is that we actually do get a leak that might happen in a minority of cases because we don't always do things perfectly. Don't even have the same impact as a couple of fields of cows. So actually, even our worst case scenario is not such a bad scenario on the grand scheme of things, right? And if the 99 other projects have been successful, apart from this one that peaked a little bit, I'd take those odds. That's still CO2 that we would have emitted into the atmosphere that we instead decided to put underground instead. Okay, but back to the more political aspect of this, which is the greenwashing. Of course, the people who see this as a business opportunity or a front, I won't name names of businesses and stuff that might use this as a greenwashing opportunity, but of course they could decide to try and play for business as usual and put in all of their advertising CCS and effectively just pretend that that makes everything okay, that we can carry on extracting oil and gas and burning it and doing whatever we want. But it's okay because we put a bit of money into CCS and that's fine. But I'm going to say, no, that's not what we want to do at all. This CCS needs to be implemented for the hard to abate emissions. So this is the heavy industries, things like cement and waste to energy, which is what's being used in the Northern Lights project. But it's really not an easy switch. So some things are easy to switch and some things are difficult. If you've ever tried like doing veganuary or a vegan diet, you'll know that it's easy to switch cow milk for oat milk. It's much harder to get vegan cheese. So some things are just much harder to switch, and we should do all the easy things to switch and even some of the more difficult things to switch. Some things will take a lot longer to switch. Some things potentially cannot be switched in any time in the medium term. So for those industries, we should definitely do CCS, and maybe someone will find a solution or an alternative to that in the longer term. But in the short term, we do need CCS to just offset those emissions quicker. But it doesn't mean we cannot bother to reduce our oil and gas consumption at all, because we should definitely be doing that alongside CCS. But the only way this is going to be done effectively is if governments have good policies, if they actually enforce regulations that actually check on these companies, enforce a carbon price, a tax, something like that, that's actually going to mean that these companies can't just greenwash themselves and they really have to be taking the action that they need, because if no one is holding them accountable, they're probably not going to do it right. So CCS is safe, it is a good strategy. It can only be implemented effectively if we have governments and good policies that can ensure that this isn't co-opted as a greenwashing strategy. And final thought then, which was already alluded to in one of our earlier talks, is that one of the other reasons we can't just switch off oil and gas tonight and go fully renewable is also a geological problem. And that's the available of these rare earth minerals and things that we actually need to build solar panels and wind turbines and batteries. So that's not an easy switch at all either, actually. So we can't cut these things out super easily. And also, we might just be switching one fossil dependence for another, because these things aren't super renewable either as it stands, and we're just going to have massive open pit mines all over the world and be exploiting whatever we can mineral-wise. So it might not be necessarily a good thing to rush into that at the moment when we actually want to figure out a way of doing that sustainably as well on the mining side of things. So this is a complicated problem, and I think all of the speakers tonight have kind of emphasized the same thing, that this is complicated, but it can be done, crucially. So the final take-home points then, yes, CCS is needed, but only as part of this broad energy transition. It doesn't mean we can just go on business as usual for fossil fuels. Yes, from a geological or scientific perspective, it can be done safely and effectively. If you do hear about setbacks in CCS projects, that doesn't mean scrap the whole thing. It doesn't work. This is a learning process as well. But we do have that oil and gas knowledge already that we can leverage to speed things up a bit. And yeah, I already said the last one. Yes, we need the policy and the regulations to make sure this is not just used as a greenwashing strategy. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that mostly answers the question of whether it's maybe a solution.
Yeah, true.
So that was our last speaker. Thank you all so much again for coming. Tomorrow we have another set of presentations.
Okay, no questions. Questions are banned.
No, that's a question.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure they didn't do that if they wanted to like get up and run away. You don't look like you're getting up and run away. We do have some time for questions.
How many tons of CO2 on average would be captured in the projects that you work on or see?
Mm-hmm.
And can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Are there any models that look at the hard to abate emissions? How many projects would need to be implemented until say 2050 when we're supposed to be at net zero?
Beautiful question. Yes. Should I take the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, really good question. So at the moment, the CCS projects that exist right now, they're a drop in the ocean compared to this 35 gigatons globally a year that I showed. For example, the Northern Lights project is going to ramp up to 5 million tons per year, and it starts injecting next year in 2024. So 5 million tons versus 35 billion tons. We're going to need a lot more, but of course, we're not trying to tackle 35 billion tons of CO2 emissions with CCS. This is where it needs to come alongside the reductions as well. So hopefully, a lot of that can be cut out just by quitting fossil fuels in a lot of sectors. In terms of how many CCS projects we would need for what's left over, that I'm not sure about. All I know is it's a lot more than what we're currently doing. So it needs to be upscaled. And I know the UK now has several projects that it hopes to do a similar amount to the Northern Lights project. So, you know, it's 5 million again and 5 million again, and it's little by little. But the bigger part of that 35 gigatons absolutely has to just come from cut it out completely. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the interesting presentation. One question is about how much energy do we need to actually capture the carbon? And I guess people wouldn't be investing if it doesn't make a net benefit in terms of carbon storage. But I was wondering whether it's very energy intensive to actually transport that carbon. And the second question is about this sandstone and the mudstone. How distributed is it across the earth? Because I imagine a lot of areas where we need a lot of where they have a lot of heavy industry, maybe they don't have the same rock formations, and then it's hard for them to.
Yeah, also a really good question. Oh wait, I've started thinking about the sandstone and mudstone, and now I forgot your first question. If you talk to me about rocks, I can think about rocks. What was the first question? Yes, if it's energy, yes, if it's actually too energy intensive to be worth it. Well, the answer is no, it is worth it, and also we can power these systems with renewable energies, for example. So obviously at the moment, Norway, I think we said in the quiz and we said in the previous talks, is operating most of its generating most of its electricity already by renewables. So if Norway put in a couple more offshore wind farms, for example, which are kind of actually already being used to power some of the oil and gas rigs that exist on the continental shelf already. So maybe we can just take those when those shut down. Yes, then we can power this process renewably as well, effectively. And the second question was about the sandstones and mudstones. Yes. Okay, so actually a lot of the basins around the world are filled with sedimentary rocks, which are the vast majority of which are sands and muds. So the whole North Sea, for example, is basically sand and mud, a bit of carbonate as well in some cases. But there are places like Iceland, for example, where they don't have sands and muds. And actually, I forgot to talk about this as well, but Iceland is doing CCS in basalt. So in offshore basins, we're really looking at sands and muds mainly. You can also use basalt, which then has a different process for reacting with the CO2 as well. The main problem with that at the moment is that process is super water intensive, fresh water intensive. You need huge volumes of fresh water to dissolve the CO2 into before you then pump this weak acid, which is made, into the basalts. So there are other rock types that you can do it with as well. So every country should basically do what makes sense for them geologically. In some cases, that might be sands and muds, and in some cases, it's basalts. It's not necessarily that one is better than the other, but most countries will have sands and muds in their immediate offshore because that's the nature of when we rift something, it immediately gets filled with all the sand and stuff that's draining off the continental shelf. So they are the most common rock type. Yeah.
One very easy technical question, like just to imagine it. So if I took a syringe and was going to inject something into a piece part of my body, and I was going to take it out again, then there is obviously a hole created, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So when you do this CCS into the ground, why doesn't it come up again through the hole that you have digged?
Yes, good question. And so I think the answer to that, or the simplest answer to that, is maybe illustrated with this. So in the early phases, the CO2 is buoyant as a supercritical fluid. So from where you inject it, it will start flowing away and usually in the up dip direction because it's a buoyant supercritical fluid at this point. On the even longer time scale, it will then start to dissolve into the pool water. So that's when we start to make this very weak hydrochloric acid again. And then on an even longer time scale, it will start to mineralize within the rock formation. But initially, when we inject it, it will flow away from the wellbore just because the physics of the system means it moves naturally up dip, and the pressure means that it will push itself away from the borehole. And then we can plug these wells. Now that we know that we're actually guarding these wells against CO2, we can plug them with the correct densities to mean that nothing flows back up that. It is actually a problem with old oil and gas wells, though, that were not plugged very well. So this is one of the key risk factors when looking offshore for CO2 storage sites. We want to avoid any old oil and gas wells that were probably not plugged effectively.
I was going to ask, because a lot of oil and gas companies, but also the Norwegian government talks about like it's the future for Norway once oil and gas is not going to be sold. What kind of business model are we talking about? Like, can you make enough money with it? Should you make money with it?
Yeah. That's a great question. And all the companies that are doing this at the moment kind of hope this is going to be a business opportunity, and the Norwegian government definitely hopes it's going to be a business opportunity. So much of their revenue at the moment comes from oil and gas. What are they going to do without that, basically? So they're hoping that then they can be, the bin for all the CO2 waste that Northern Europe produces, and that other countries will then pay them to go and dump the CO2 emissions offshore. And that may well be what happens, and it may not. I think then we get into more of the modeling range of uncertainty scenario, because I think they're certainly hoping it becomes a business opportunity, and maybe it won't. And maybe the alternative is we just need to mandate if you produce CO2, you have to pay for that to be disposed of well. And then it's not a profitable business, but it's something that the government enforces because that's what we need. Yeah.
One more question.
And theory, what is the capacity in the world for CCS?
Oh, enormous, actually. We have so many rocks in the world. Yeah, we definitely have more. Yeah, we definitely have more rock space than we actually need to inject CO2 into, even if we were going to do the 35 gigatons, which we absolutely don't want to do. The capacity exists. The main barriers to this is cost and implementation and enforcing it. But technically, we have the capacity as long as we de-risk it well with the geologists that actually know what they're doing and understand the subsurface, and we have some catch-alls for that. And then it needs to be funded one way or another, and and we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All our speakers will be around for a little bit after if you have more questions, if you want to follow up. But for right now, that is the end of our official program. Join us tomorrow. Our topic is invisible environments at risk. And we also actually already have planned next year's time. It's May 13th to 15th next year. If you are interested, we do need volunteers. We do need speakers. So if you've been inspired to either help us make this or be one of our speakers, please come talk to one of us. And that's it. Can we get another round of applause for our speakers? And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.